The problem wasn't what happened on the date. The problem was that the wrong person showed up. Jack and Jake Valentine were identical twin brothers. They had the same build, the same hairstyle, the same hair color, and they even sounded the same when they spoke. Physically, there was no difference between them. If you didn't know them well, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Valentine, usually had trouble telling them apart, and the same was true for their friends at school. The only thing that set them apart was their personality. Jack loved attention and never struggled to get it. He was charming, funny, and confident. Jack was the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with friends. He was the life of the party, and everyone knew it. Jake was the opposite. Jake was quiet. He preferred to stay out of the way and rarely spoke unless he had to. Jake didn't like crowds and didn't get involved in things that didn't concern him. He was calm, distant, and often misunderstood as uninterested, when in truth, he just didn't like noise. They had a younger sister named Annabelle. Everyone called her Anna. Anna was blonde like her brothers, with blue eyes and a bright smile. Her most noticeable feature was her dimples. When she smiled, they showed deeply, and people remembered her for them. Anna had a personality closer to Jack's. She was outspoken, cheerful, and full of life. Anna had a way of bringing light into any space she walked into. Anna had a best friend named Cleo. Cleo was nothing like Anna. Cleo was quiet, much like Jake. She didn't talk much about how she felt and preferred to keep her thoughts to herself. Instead of speaking her feelings out loud, she wrote them down in a diary. Her diary was where she said the things she couldn't say to people. Cleo loved peace. She loved calm. Chaos made her uncomfortable, and she would never sacrifice her peace for anything or anyone. Cleo was an only child, so she spent a lot of time at the Valentine house. Sometimes she stayed for the weekend. Sometimes she stayed for days. Anna made life feel lighter for her. Where Cleo was quiet and serious, Anna was playful and fun. They did everything together. At school, they ate lunch together. Outside school, they went on little girls' outings. Anna dragged Cleo into doing things she wouldn't normally do alone, shopping for clothes, trying makeup, fixing her hair, and going out just to enjoy being young. In the Valentine family, there was a tradition. Every Valentine's Day, they exchanged gifts with one another. Jack always had a date on Valentine's Day. Every year, without fail, there was someone waiting for him, someone to take out, someone to give a gift to. Jake, on the other hand, preferred to stay indoors. He liked playing video games, eating popcorn, playing his guitar, and keeping to himself. Valentine's Day didn't mean much to him. At least, that's what everyone thought. At the time, everything seemed normal. No one knew that this simple routine, this quiet balance between them, was about to change. Now, there was Luke. Luke had been on Cleo's case for a long time. He followed her around at school. Sometimes he even showed up at her house unannounced. At school, he slipped notes into her bag when she wasn't looking. Luke wanted Cleo. But Luke didn't have the best reputation. He was known as a mischievous troublemaker in school. Even teachers avoided him. He didn't take his academics seriously, and when he spoke, there was something controlling in his tone. Cleo wanted nothing to do with him. For someone who loved peace and calm, Luke represented the opposite. He didn't bring comfort. He didn't bring safety. When Cleo saw Luke, she didn't see romance. She saw danger. She felt fear. She felt uncomfortable. Whenever Cleo found one of his notes in her bag, she showed it to her best friend, Anna. Anna would read them and sometimes suggest that Cleo give Luke a chance. Maybe he would change. Maybe he was actually a good person underneath it all. But Cleo never agreed. She said Luke lacked boundaries. She said he was controlling. She said he didn't respect her space. And no matter what anyone said, Cleo knew one thing for sure. She didn't like him. She wanted nothing to do with him. Luke was not friends with the twins. At school, they didn't talk to him. Outside school, they didn't associate with him. Jack and Jake didn't like Luke at all, and they didn't hide it. What bothered them the most was the way Luke showed up at their house unannounced. He would come around asking for Cleo, even when Cleo wasn't there. A lot of the time, Cleo was out with Anna, or she hadn't come over at all. Luke somehow believed Cleo lived with the Valentines, simply because he always saw her with Anna. He didn't realize that he wasn't just invading Cleo's privacy, he was invading theirs too. There were days when Jack wasn't home. Jack always had somewhere to be, someone to meet, or somewhere to go. Anna also wasn't always around. Sometimes she took Cleo out for a girls' day. Sometimes Cleo didn't come over at all. On those days, Jake was usually the only one at home. Jake loved being alone. After their parents left for work, the house was quiet, and he enjoyed that. He liked the silence. He liked his privacy. Then Luke would show up. He would knock or sometimes just stand there, asking for Cleo like he belonged there. His tone was rude. He didn't greet properly. He didn't show respect. Jake hated it. He didn't like unnecessary conversations. He especially didn't like talking to Luke. Having Luke show up at his house, uninvited, asking questions, felt like an invasion. Jake complained to his sister more than once. He told Anna to tell Cleo to tell her boyfriend to stop coming to their house. Anna always corrected him. She told Jake that Luke wasn't Cleo's boyfriend. She explained that Luke was just trying to get her and that Cleo wasn't interested at all. Jake didn't care. He said he didn't care what Luke was to Cleo. He didn't care about Luke's intentions. All he cared about was the fact that Luke kept showing his face at their house. Jake didn't want Luke anywhere near his face. Sometimes Luke would disappear for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. During that time, Cleo wouldn't hear from him. He wouldn't follow her around at school. He wouldn't show up at her house or at the Valentine house. He wouldn't leave notes. He wouldn't call. And during those moments, Cleo felt relieved. She would think, maybe he's finally off my back. But it never lasted. Out of nowhere, Luke would reappear, and everything would start all over again. Cleo was tired of it. People at school began to assume they were dating. They saw him around her so often that they believed she wanted the attention. Because of that, some people started keeping their distance from her. They didn't ask questions. They just assumed. Annabelle was the only one who stayed. No matter how many times Cleo complained, Anna never walked away. She never got tired of listening. Every day, Cleo had something new to say about Luke, and Anna was always there. Luke never stopped messaging her. He was always texting, always calling. If Cleo didn't respond, Luke would show up the next day and ask why. He spoke like she owed him an answer, like she owed him time. Luke acted like he was entitled to her. Sometimes, Cleo felt like she was dumping too much on Anna. She didn't want her best friend to get tired of her too. Anna was the only close friend she had. So Cleo started keeping more to herself. She wrote everything else in her diary, the things she didn't want to say out loud, the thoughts she was scared to repeat. Other people in her life slowly drifted away. They were still around at school, they still spoke once in a while, but they weren't close. And with Luke always hovering around her, even those small connections began to fade. By then, Cleo felt like her world had become very small, and Luke was always there. Sometimes Anna would ask her a simple question. If you really don't want him, she would say, why don't you tell him to his face? Shut him out. Cleo would always shake her head. I'm scared, Anna, she would say. She wasn't dramatic when she said it. She was serious. Luke scares me. I don't know what he would do if I actually told him no to his face. Luke didn't respect boundaries. That was the problem. What makes you think, Cleo would ask quietly, that if I tell him to leave me alone, he actually will? Those were the kinds of conversations Cleo and Anna had most times. Anna understood where Cleo was coming from. She really did. She knew Luke was a problem. She knew Cleo wasn't exaggerating. But Anna was different. Anna was outspoken. When something felt wrong, she called it out. She wasn't afraid of confrontation. She didn't enjoy conflict, but she didn't run from it either. To her, part of the reason Luke kept pushing was because Cleo never shut the door completely. Anna believed Luke needed to hear the truth clearly. Cleo didn't see it that way. To Cleo, speaking up felt dangerous. Luke didn't act like someone with a crush. He acted like someone obsessed, like someone who already believed he owned space in her life, and that scared her. So Cleo stayed quiet, and Luke stayed close. Cleo was very artistic. Drawing was the one thing that came easily to her. When she picked up a pencil, she didn't rush. She noticed details, the way people sat, the way they smiled, the way they looked when they weren't trying to. She had drawn Anna many times, laughing, talking, sitting on her bed. Anna loved those drawings. Every birthday, Cleo gave Anna a new one. Anna kept every single piece in a file, safe and neat. Sometimes they looked through them together, laughing and talking about old memories. Drawing helped Cleo understand the world. It helped her notice things other people missed. Because Cleo spent so much time at the Valentine house, she became familiar with its rhythm. She knew when the house was quiet. She knew when someone was home without seeing them. At home, Jake had a routine. If he wasn't in his room playing video games, he was watching movies. If he wasn't watching movies, he was in the kitchen grabbing popcorn or chips, his favorite snacks. And if he wasn't doing any of that, he was playing his guitar. But Jake didn't stay inside all the time. When he did leave the house, it was usually with his bike. He loved that bike. He didn't announce where he was going. He didn't explain himself. Most times, he would just grab his keys, wheel the bike out, and ride off. Sometimes he was gone for an hour, sometimes longer. No one ever really knew where he went. He always came back on his own time. He didn't ride to be seen. He rode because it cleared his head. The movement, the air, the road beneath the tires. It gave him space. On days when the house felt full, Jake took his bike. On days when his thoughts felt heavy, Jake took his bike. And sometimes he rode simply because he felt like it. The bike was his way of stepping out without stepping into anything he didn't want. And when he returned, he went back to his routine: the guitar, the movies, the quiet. Both twins had bikes. At first glance, they looked almost the same. Same color, same build, same shape, just like the twins themselves. The only difference was the name tag. Each bike had a small metal plate fixed near the handle. One read Jack, the other read Jake. That was how people told them apart. Both of them loved their bikes. Both of them enjoyed speed. When they rode freely, letting the road stretch out in front of them. Jake didn't go out as often as Jack did, but when he did, he rode just as fast, just as far. If you saw a bike pass by quickly, you wouldn't know which twin it was until you noticed the name. That small metal plate told you everything. When they were younger, the bikes were always a problem. Jack and Jake used to fight over them all the time. One day, one bike would be theirs. The next day, it belonged to the other. If one bike broke down or started acting up, they would argue over who owned the better one. Each of them always claimed the good bike. No one wanted the one with loose brakes or noisy chain. Their parents had to step in more times than they could count, trying to remind them that the bikes belonged to both of them. But the arguments never really stopped. As they grew older, things changed. They got older bikes, better ones, and this time the bikes were clearly theirs. That was when the name tags appeared. There was no confusion anymore. No more arguments about whose bike was whose, no more switching, no more fights over the better one. The bikes stayed with their owners. And somehow that small change said a lot about how much they had grown. They were still identical, still close, still brothers. But now, each of them had something that was clearly his. Some days, Anna went out. She had friends, plans, places to be. Sometimes she invited Cleo along. Other times, Cleo stayed back. On those days, the house felt different, quieter. Cleo liked those moments. She stayed in her corner, reading a book or sketching. She didn't feel the need to fill the silence. Jake was usually home, too. He sat in his room, playing his guitar like he always did. The sound drifted through the house, soft and steady, not loud enough to interrupt, just enough to be there. Cleo didn't move closer. She stayed where she was. But the music changed the air. It slowed her thoughts. It made the house feel settled, like nothing else was expected from her. Sometimes she stopped reading without realizing it. Sometimes her pencil paused over the page. The music didn't distract her. It focused her. Jake played without knowing anyone was listening. Cleo listened without letting it show. They stayed in their separate spaces, doing their own things. And somehow, that felt easy. Some evenings, Anna stayed out longer than usual. She went out with friends. Sometimes she didn't say when she'd be back. Cleo didn't mind. She stayed behind in Anna's room, curled up on the bed, or sitting by the window with a book. Jake was still home. He didn't announce himself. He rarely did. At some point, the sound of his guitar filled the house again, soft and steady, like it always did. Cleo turned a page, then another. She didn't rush. She wasn't waiting for anything. After a while, she closed her book and reached for her sketch pad instead. She flipped through a few blank pages, then stopped. Her pencil hovered for a moment before she let it touch the paper. The music continued. Jake played without stopping. No breaks, no sudden changes. Just the same calm rhythm, like he was somewhere else entirely. Cleo drew slowly. She didn't draw the house. She didn't draw Anna. She didn't draw anyone in particular. She just let her hand move. The house stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel empty. The kind that felt full enough on its own. When Jake finished playing, there was no announcement, no door opening, no footsteps. The sound simply stopped. Cleo didn't look up right away. She finished what she was drawing, closed her sketchpad, and sat there for a moment longer. When Anna finally came home later that night, everything felt normal again. But something about that quiet evening stayed. Over time, Cleo started to notice something. Whenever Jake played the guitar, she felt calmer. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough for her shoulders to relax, just enough for her thoughts to slow down. Sometimes it made her want to draw. She didn't plan it. She didn't sit down with an idea in mind. She just reached for her sketchpad without thinking too much about it. The pencil moved easier when the guitar was playing. Her lines were steadier. Her hand felt lighter. The page didn't feel as intimidating. She didn't question it. She didn't stop to wonder why. She just let it happen. Jake played in his room. Cleo drew where she was. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. A few days later, things felt normal again. They were sitting together during lunch. Cleo, Anna, Jack, and Jake. Nothing special, just food on the table and quiet conversation. They didn't always sit together. Most days, Jack and Jake had their own circles, their own classmates, their own routines. Cleo and Anna spent most of their time with their own peers too. But sometimes, Anna liked being around her brothers. On days like that, she stayed close to them during lunch, and whenever Anna was there, Cleo was usually there too. So once in a while, the four of them found themselves at the same table. That day was one of those days. Cleo hadn't said much. Anna noticed. She leaned closer and smiled. "You've been quiet today." Cleo shrugged. Anna paused, then brightened. "Wait," she said, "your birthday's around the corner." Cleo looked up. "Yeah, it's close." "So what are we doing?" Anna asked. Cleo shook her head. "I don't really have plans." Jack glanced over. "No plans at all?" "I don't want to do anything big," Cleo said. Anna frowned playfully. "You said that last year, and the year before that." Cleo gave a small smile. "I know." "This year should be different," Anna said. "You can't keep saying that every time." Before Cleo could respond, someone stepped closer to the table. Luke. He didn't ask if he could sit. He didn't greet anyone properly. He didn't acknowledge the conversation. He stood there looking straight at Cleo. "I haven't heard from you," he said. "You've been ignoring me." Cleo didn't respond. She kept her eyes on her food. Luke leaned closer. "I'm talking to you." Still, Cleo said nothing. Jack looked up. "She doesn't want to talk to you," he said calmly. "Back off." Luke scoffed. She doesn't need you speaking for her. Jack stood up. She does when you don't listen. Luke stepped closer. The space between them closed. The table went quiet. Luke's jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist. He stared at Jack, measuring him. Jack didn't move. He didn't flinch. Anna stayed beside Cleo. Jake said nothing. Luke stared at Cleo one last time. "You think you can just shut me out?" he said. Jack's tone sharpened. "I said, leave." Luke hesitated. "This isn't over," he said quietly, then turned and walked away. The tension lingered even after he was gone. No one spoke. Jake stood up. Without a word, he picked up his bag and walked off. A few moments later, the sound of a bike cut through the noise of the school. Cleo looked up. Jake was already riding away. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. Anna watched him leave. Jack frowned. Cleo stayed where she was, her hands resting on the table, wondering why the silence felt louder than the argument. Cleo went home. She didn't suggest going back to the Valentine house. What happened at lunch stayed with her, heavy and uncomfortable. Luke and Jack had never crossed paths before. Seeing them face each other like that unsettled her. And then Jake walking away without a word, that stayed with her too. She needed space to think, to sit with everything, to let it settle. But more than that, she didn't want to be the reason things felt tense at the Valentine house. She didn't like the idea of bringing trouble into other people's space. She didn't like feeling like her problems were spilling into their lives. Meanwhile, Jake had already gone home. He left early, riding off on his bike without explanation, letting the road clear his head. Later that day, when Anna and Jack got home, the house was quiet. Jack went straight to Jake's room. Jake was on his bed. He wasn't playing his guitar. He wasn't watching anything. He was just there, lost in his thoughts. "Hey," Jack said. "You okay?" Jake nodded. "Yeah." Jack leaned against the doorframe. "Why'd you leave like that?" Jake didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I hate that boy." Jack smiled faintly. "Hate's a strong word, but yeah, me too." "I hate his face," Jake added. "I hate his hair." Jack laughed under his breath. "But that's not why you left," Jack said, "is it?" Jake said nothing. Jack waited for a moment, then nodded to himself. He knew his brother well enough. When Jake went quiet like that, the conversation was over. Jack pushed himself away from the door and turned to leave. Just before he stepped out, Jake spoke. "Is he always like that to her?" Jack stopped. He turned around slowly. "I guess so," he said. Jake didn't say anything after that. Jack stood there for a moment longer, then walked out. Jake stayed on his bed, the quiet pressing in again. That same day, Cleo's room felt quiet when she got home. Anyone who walked in would know right away that the room belonged to someone who loved books. There were novels stacked on her desk, school books by her bedside, and textbooks tucked neatly against the wall. Cleo sat on her bed with her diary resting on her lap. She wrote slowly. Her body felt tired, heavier than usual. Her thoughts kept circling back to the same moment. Her heart beat faster than she expected, skipping once, then again. It made her pause. She didn't know why she felt like that. For a moment, she wondered if the Valentines were tired of her, if the tension she brought had finally become too much. She wondered if Jack was angry, if Jake was upset, if Anna would get tired of having to reassure her. Cleo hated that thought. Her phone buzzed. It was Anna. Cleo answered. "Hey," Anna said gently. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay," Cleo replied. There was a short pause on the line. "Do you want me to come over?" Anna asked. "I can spend the night if you want." Cleo shook her head, even though Anna couldn't see her. "No," she said. "I'm really okay. I just need some time." Anna understood. "I just want you to know," she said. "I love you, and no matter what happens, I'm always here. If you need anything, anything at all, I'm here." Cleo felt her chest loosen a little. "Thank you," she said softly. She smiled, just a little. Before they hung up, Cleo spoke again. "Can you thank Jack for me?" she asked. "Tell him I'm really grateful for today, and tell him I'm sorry about Luke." "I will," Anna said. "And don't worry about my brothers, they're fine." Cleo hesitated. "And Jake, too," she added quietly. "I'll tell him," Anna said. They said goodbye and the call ended. Cleo sat there for a moment, phone still in her hand. She felt slightly better. Not relieved, just steadier. She put her phone down, picked up her pen again, and continued writing in her diary. For a few days after that incident, Luke disappeared. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't show up. It wasn't new. Luke had done this before. Sometimes he went quiet for a while, then came back like nothing happened. So Cleo didn't feel relieved. She knew better. She knew the silence never lasted. Cleo also stopped going to the Valentine house for a while, not because she wanted space from Anna. She still spoke to her every day. They talked on the phone, they met at school, their friendship didn't change. But Cleo was careful. She didn't stay too long. She didn't linger. She didn't let herself settle into Anna's space the way she used to. She didn't know when Luke would show up again. And now that someone had challenged him for the first time, Cleo had a feeling things wouldn't be the same. She felt it in her chest, a quiet warning she couldn't explain. If Luke came back, she believed he would come back with intention. So Cleo kept moving. She chatted with Anna for a bit, then excused herself. She stayed busy. She kept her distance, not from people, but from situations. Anna noticed. She didn't say anything about it. She understood why Cleo was doing what she was doing, and she didn't want to push her. Cleo had always needed time to process things in her own way. So Anna let her move at her own pace. Even the thought of Cleo's birthday stayed unspoken. Anna considered bringing it up once or twice, then decided against it. If Cleo didn't like making a big deal of birthdays on normal days, this wasn't the right time to push it. Not when everything still felt unsettled. Anna also knew Cleo wasn't a big birthday person. She never had been. Most years, Cleo was perfectly fine letting the day pass quietly. Especially now. Cleo had been down lately, quieter than usual, more distant, carrying things she didn't talk about. Anna didn't like that, so she didn't ask. She decided instead. Not something big, not something loud, just something thoughtful. One afternoon, Anna went shopping by herself. She moved slowly through the store, picking things carefully. Balloons, soft colors, a simple birthday banner. Nothing flashy, nothing over the top. Then she went to the stationery section. She bought new sketch pads, drawing pencils, erasers, markers, the kind of things she knew Cleo loved. When she got home, she didn't put anything up. She didn't decorate. She didn't wrap the gifts. She didn't say a word. She kept everything tucked away in her room, out of sight. Days passed. At school, Anna acted normal. She laughed. She talked. She didn't bring up the birthday. She didn't hint at anything. Cleo didn't expect anything either. She knew her birthday was coming, but she didn't anticipate it. She never did. Her parents had always kept things simple. A quiet dinner, just the three of them. A few gifts, no noise. Cleo was fine with that. And this year felt no different. She had no idea that somewhere else, Anna was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the right day. The night before her birthday, Anna called Cleo. "I miss you," Anna said. "Can you come over tomorrow?" Cleo hesitated. "My parents have plans," she said. "We usually do dinner together, just us." "That's fine," Anna replied quickly. "Come earlier. You can still go home later." There was a short pause. "I just want to see you," Anna added. Cleo sighed softly. "Okay," she said. I'll come." The next day, Cleo went over to Anna's house. She wasn't expecting anything. When Anna opened the door, Cleo stepped inside and stopped. The room was decorated. Balloons, soft colors, a simple banner, a small table with gifts neatly arranged, nothing loud, nothing crowded, just enough. Cleo looked around surprised. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. Anna smiled. "I wanted it to be a surprise." Cleo laughed. "I'm really happy you did this." Anna handed her a card. Cleo opened it slowly. It was handwritten. Anna had written about their friendship, about how much Cleo meant to her, about how kind she was, how beautiful she was inside and out. Cleo felt her eyes sting. For a moment, everything else faded. The heaviness, the tension, the worry. Anna clapped her hands. "Okay," she said, "makeover time." They laughed. They did each other's hair, tried on makeup, changed outfits. They took pictures, they posed, they laughed again. Cleo smiled and smiled and smiled. She hadn't smiled like that in a long time. Later, they sat together, going through the photos, saving the ones they liked most, talking, laughing softly. Cleo liked that it was just the two of them. No party, no interruptions, no noise. Just her and her best friend. And for that moment, it was enough. Later that day, Cleo went home. She made it back in time for dinner, just like she said she would. She carried her gifts with her, holding them carefully, like they mattered, because they did. Her mom had already set the table. Dinner was simple, familiar, just the three of them. As they sat down, her parents noticed it right away. Cleo was brighter. She spoke more, she laughed more, she ate more than she had in days. There was an ease about her that hadn't been there recently. Her parents noticed, but they didn't ask questions. They didn't want to make it seem like something had been wrong before. They didn't want to turn the moment into an explanation. So they just enjoyed it. They laughed with her. Her mom made her favorite dish. Her dad teased her the way he always did. Cleo smiled through the entire meal. After dinner, her mom brought out dessert, a single candle, a quiet smile. They wished her happy birthday. That was enough. Cleo felt full, not just from the food, but from the day itself. She felt grateful for her parents, for the quiet dinner, for the morning she spent with Anna. The day ended softly. And for the first time in a while, Cleo went to bed feeling lighter than she had when she woke up. The next morning, Cleo woke up slowly. For a moment, she forgot what day it was. Then she remembered. Yesterday, the balloons, the cake, Anna's letter, the quiet dinner at home. She reached for her phone. There was a message from Luke. It was short, simple, nothing dramatic. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she locked her phone and set it down. She didn't reply. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she didn't want to say anything at all. The quiet mattered more. Later that morning, by the time she stepped onto the school grounds, it already felt like part of the day. The hallways were busy, like always. Lockers slammed, voices overlapped, people moved past her without noticing anything different. Everything looked normal. Luke wasn't there. At least, not where she could see him. That unsettled her more than if he had been. She went through her classes quietly. She listened, took notes, answered questions when she had to. She noticed herself. She was steadier than she expected. Not relaxed, just grounded, like she had made a choice and was standing by it. At lunch, she sat with Anna and a few friends. Anna talked easily, filling the space. Cleo smiled when she needed to, laughed softly, stayed present. Luke didn't show up. Cleo noticed that too. Later, as she walked down the hallway, she saw them. Jack and Jake stood together near the lockers. Jake noticed her first. Jack turned, following his brother's gaze. "Hey," he said, smiling easily. "I heard you had a good day yesterday." Cleo smiled. "I did." Jack grinned. "You didn't save me any cake, did you?" She laughed softly. Sorry, no cake left. Wow, I see how it is, Jack said sarcastically. Jake said nothing. The bell rang. Cleo adjusted her bag and kept walking. I'll see you around, she said. Sure, Jack replied. Jake gave one last glance as she passed. Then she was gone. Days passed. Then more days. Cleo didn't hear from Luke. At first, she waited for it. She waited for the calls, the messages, the sudden appearance somewhere she didn't expect. That was how it usually went. Luke didn't take being ignored lightly. Silence always provoked him. Distance only worked when it came from him, not when it came from her. So Cleo prepared herself, but nothing happened. It was strange. She wasn't worried because she missed him. She didn't miss him at all. If anything, she felt relieved. The space felt good. It felt quiet. And yet, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like something was still there, just out of reach, like a shadow that hadn't fully left. Cleo didn't know how to explain it. She tried to enjoy the space, but part of her stayed alert. She couldn't fully relax into the relief. Still, life went on. Annabelle stayed close, as she always did. They had lunch together, went out after school, spent time at each other's houses, talking, laughing, doing small things that made the days feel lighter. And slowly, Cleo started to breathe again. Sometimes, in the middle of laughing, the thought would cross her mind. I haven't seen Luke in a while. A few times, she almost said it out loud. Almost. When she finally did, Annabelle waved it off gently. If you haven't heard from him, then don't think about it, she said. Isn't this what you wanted? Enjoy it. Cleo tried to laugh it away. I'm not worried, she said. It's just unlike him. Annabelle raised an eyebrow. Are you missing him? No, Cleo said quickly. I'm not. She hesitated, then added, He texted me on my birthday. I didn't reply. I thought that would set him off. Annabelle shrugged. Maybe he moved on. Cleo didn't answer. Sometimes Annabelle would change the subject. Sometimes she'd say, Can we not talk about Luke for a while? And Cleo agreed. With time, Luke's absence started to feel normal. Cleo moved more freely. She stopped checking over her shoulder as often. She walked through school without tightening up. Sometimes she wondered if Jack had scared him off, if that confrontation had finally drawn a line Luke couldn't cross. The thought made her feel safer, so she let it go. Little by little, Cleo began to believe that maybe Luke was really gone, and for the first time in a long while, the space felt like freedom. Cleo started spending more time at the Valentine house again. Not every day, just enough for it to feel normal. Sometimes Anna would be busy, on a call, in her room, or out with friends. On those days, Cleo stayed anyway. She sat at the dining table with her sketchpad open, pencil resting loosely in her hand. She stared at the page longer than usual. Sometimes drawing came easily. Other times she needed a moment. Most times, Cleo needed to change where she sat before she could draw. Some days it was her bed, other days the floor. That afternoon, it was the dining table. Jake was in the living room. She could hear him shift, then the soft sound of his guitar being picked up. For a while, nothing happened. Then Jake spoke without looking up. You always start like that? He asked. Cleo looked up, surprised. Start like what? Before you actually draw something, he said. You hesitate. She smiled faintly. Yeah. Jake nodded once. He didn't say anything else. A few seconds later, he began to play. Not a full song, just quiet chords, slow, unfinished. Cleo looked back at her sketchpad. This time, her pencil moved. The lines came easier, less hesitation. Her hand relaxed as she drew. Jake kept playing. He noticed when her page started to fill. He didn't comment on it. When her hands started to ache and her focus faded, she simply closed her sketch pad, left it on the table, and went upstairs to Annabelle's room. Jake was still in the living room. At first, he didn't move. Then, almost without thinking, he stood and walked toward the dining table. The sketch pad was still there. He hesitated, just for a second. Then, he opened it. He didn't flip through quickly. He turned the pages slowly, carefully, like he didn't want to miss anything. There were drawings of Annabelle, different ones from different days. Some neat, some loose, some half-finished. He noticed the details, the expressions, the way Cleo paid attention to small things most people overlooked. He turned another page, then another. He didn't smile, he didn't react outwardly at all, but he kept looking. When he heard movement upstairs, he closed the sketch pad exactly the way he found it and stepped back. By the time Cleo and Anna came down later, it was as if nothing had happened. Jake was back on the couch, playing. The school day ended quietly. Students filtered out in groups, voices rising as they stepped into the open air. Cleo walked beside Annabelle, listening more than she spoke. At the gate, Annabelle stopped to answer a call. "I'll catch up," she said. Cleo nodded and slowed her pace. That was when she saw Jake. He stood near his bike, helmet tucked under his arm, adjusting something near the handle. She wasn't sure if he had noticed her yet. Then he looked up. Their eyes met. Jake didn't look away. He didn't smile either. He just held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Cleo replied. Nothing else followed. Jake turned back to his bike, but he didn't leave. He stayed there, tightening a bolt that didn't seem loose, checking something twice. Cleo stood where she was, unsure why she hadn't moved yet. When Annabelle called her name from behind, Jake finally swung a leg over his bike. "I'll see you," he said. Then he rode off. Later that afternoon, the house went quiet. No guitar, no movie playing in the background, no sound of buttons clicking from a game controller. Cleo noticed it without trying to. Jake wasn't inside. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped outside, thinking she'd take a short walk. That's when she saw him. Jake was outside when Cleo stepped out. He was crouched beside his bike, tightening something near the wheel. He always did that, fixing things that didn't seem broken. Cleo stood a few steps away. "You're always fixing it. Does your bike ever actually have a problem?" Jake didn't look up. "Just a habit." She smiled and moved closer. "I never had a bike growing up," she said casually, "not even as a kid." Jake paused for a moment, then went back to what he was doing. "Oh." Cleo watched him for a second. "Have you ever carried anyone on it?" she asked. Jake straightened up. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes. Annabelle." She nodded. "Only Annabelle?" He didn't answer right away. "Mostly," he said finally. There was a short silence. Then Cleo spoke again, carefully this time. "I think it'd be nice," she said, "to ride sometime." Jake froze. Not visibly, just enough. His hand rested on the handle, unmoving. "One of these days," he said after a moment. He didn't look at her. Cleo smiled like that was enough. "Okay." Jake stood, swung a leg over the bike, adjusted his helmet. "I'll see you later," he said. "Yeah," Cleo replied. He rode off. She stayed where she was, watching until he disappeared down the street. After that day, Cleo didn't bring it up again. Jake hadn't given a day. He hadn't said when. So she waited. Not loudly, not obviously, just quietly. She noticed the change first in small ways. Jake stopped the little conversations, the passing comments, the moments that used to happen without effort. He was still there, still around, but more distant, more inside himself. He rode his bike often, after school, in the evenings, sometimes during the day. He would ride off the same way he always did, no announcement, no explanation. Cleo watched him go more than once. Each time, a thought followed. Maybe he's going somewhere specific. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe he hasn't forgotten, just not now. She didn't know which thought was true, so she kept them all. Because of that, she stayed longer at the Valentine house. On days she could have gone home, she stayed, just in case. If Jake decided to ride, if today turned out to be the day, if she left too early and missed it. She didn't tell anyone about it, not even Annabelle. She wasn't sure if it was something worth saying out loud. Jake kept moving, and Cleo kept waiting. It got to a point where Cleo stopped waiting loudly. She made herself available in quiet ways, not in his face, not close enough to feel obvious, just present enough that if Jake wanted to ask, he could. The weather had changed. The air was cold, sharp, the kind that made people rush home. Cleo didn't rush. She walked toward the parking area instead of her usual route. Not because she had a plan, just because Jake parked his bike there. She stood a little distance away, not close enough to be obvious, not far enough to disappear, just present. She watched students leave, laughter, noise, movement. Then she saw Jake. He walked straight toward his bike. No pause, no scanning around, no fixing anything like he usually did. He didn't look her way. Cleo felt it then. Not suddenly, but clearly. Jake got on his bike immediately, kick-started it, rode off. No hesitation. And slowly, the excuses stopped forming. She realized she was making space for something that wasn't coming. She didn't confront him. She wasn't sure it was even something she was allowed to be upset about. Cleo stayed where she was for a few seconds longer. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel rejected, just tired. She turned around and took the long way home. That night, she didn't stay back at the Valentine house. She didn't wait for tomorrow. She told herself it was okay. Cleo going home didn't mean anything to anyone else. She didn't cut anyone off. She didn't disappear. She didn't stop talking to Annabelle or avoid her at school. They still laughed, still walked together, still spoke the same way they always had. To Annabelle, everything felt normal. Annabelle never noticed. But Jake did. He didn't say anything, but something about it felt different to him. Cleo going home wasn't unusual, but this time it didn't feel casual. He knew why. He knew what he had done. And when he realized she wasn't around, the first thing he felt was relief. Relief that the pressure was gone. Relief that he didn't have to act. Relief that nothing was being expected of him anymore. For a while, everything felt normal again. Cleo didn't make it a big deal. No one asked questions. Jack didn't know. Annabelle didn't know. Nothing had changed on the surface. But after some time, the relief wore off, and what replaced it was guilt. Jake tried to brush it away, but it stayed. Because he wasn't stupid. He knew Cleo had been hopeful. He knew what his silence meant. Once he asked Annabelle how Cleo was doing. Annabelle looked at him, confused. "She's fine. Why?" "Nothing," he said. "Just asking." And then he said nothing else. Classes ended. Students laughed, complained about homework, rushed to meet friends, rushed to get home. Life moved the way it always did. Nothing appeared out of place. No alarms, no warnings. Cleo was exhausted that day. Not the dramatic kind of exhaustion, just the quiet heaviness that comes after too many classes, too many thoughts, too much mental noise. All she wanted was to get home. She walked alone, backpack hanging loosely on one shoulder, already halfway lost in her thoughts. She started down the staircase, and then her eyes caught someone. She froze. Her heart skipped so sharply it almost felt painful. A silent gasp left her chest before she could stop it. For a split second, she genuinely wondered if she was imagining things, if her mind was playing tricks on her, if exhaustion had finally caught up with her. Someone was coming up the stairs as she was going down. He didn't look at her. He didn't hesitate. He didn't change his pace. Hands buried in his pockets, eyes fixed straight ahead, expression unreadable, he walked past her like she didn't exist, like they had never met, like there was no history, no tension, no past at all. And that was what made it worse. If he had stopped, if he had spoken, if he had even glanced at her, she could have understood that. But this felt colder than anger. She turned her head slowly, watching him continue up the stairs. He didn't turn back, not even for a second. His shoulders stayed squared, his steps steady, his presence different. She noticed it immediately. The way he used to move, commanding, intimidating, like the hallway belonged to him, that was gone. This version of him walked like someone with nowhere to be, no one to see, like just another student passing through. It wasn't just the way he walked. Even the way he dressed was different. Luke was always loud in his appearance before, the kind of outfit that warned people before he even spoke. But this time, there was nothing aggressive about it. He still looked good, still confident, but softer somehow, cleaner, like someone who wasn't trying to prove anything. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Cleo stood there. She didn't finish walking down the stairs. She didn't move at all. Her body stayed frozen while her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Minutes passed. She didn't realize how long she had been standing there until a voice snapped her back into the moment. "Hey, are you okay?" She blinked, turned, nodded quickly, mumbled something she didn't even hear herself say. By the time she looked back up the stairs, he was gone. She didn't move from the spot. Still standing by the stairs, Cleo reached for her phone with shaky fingers. Her heart was still racing, her thoughts tangled and loud. The first name she tapped was Annabelle's. It rang. No answer. She tried again. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. That was strange. Annabelle always had her phone on her. Always. She was social, always texting someone, always on a call, always reachable. Cleo frowned, staring at the screen as if it might explain itself. She sent a text. No reply. Her chest tightened. She hadn't really seen Annabelle much that day at school either. No lunch together, no quick wave in the hallway, nothing. The silence felt wrong, and it only made her thoughts spiral faster. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and started walking, fast. As she moved through the school grounds, her eyes kept scanning without her meaning to. Over her shoulder, ahead of her, around corners. She didn't even know what she was looking for anymore, or who. She just knew she didn't want to be alone with her thoughts. Without fully deciding to, she found herself heading toward the Valentine house. If Annabelle wasn't answering, then maybe she was already home. At least that's what Cleo told herself. She was still walking quickly when she ran into someone. "Hey!" Jack's voice stopped her. She slowed, forcing a small wave, a rushed smile. "Hi!" But Jack didn't let it end there. Hey, he said, stepping in front of her slightly. "What's wrong? You okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. Jack tilted his head, unconvinced. "You know you can talk to me, right? Come on, what's going on?" There was something about Jack, his tone, his ease, the way he looked at people that made it hard to lie for too long. He made things feel lighter without even trying. She opened her mouth to speak. That was when Jake walked up. Cleo hesitated. She didn't want Jake to hear this, not because she didn't trust him, but because she knew who this was about. "Jack," she said quietly, pulling him a little to the side. Jack followed without question. "I saw him," she said, her voice low. Jack frowned. "Saw who?" "Luke." Jack's expression changed instantly. "That guy is back?" She nodded. "Did he do anything?" Jack asked, sharply. "Did he say something, touch you, threaten you?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's the problem. He didn't do anything. He just walked past me, like I wasn't even there." She struggled to explain it. It didn't feel like him. The way he walked, the way he looked, everything about him felt different. Jack exhaled slowly. "I don't trust that guy," he said, "but he's lucky he didn't do anything to you." Then his tone softened. "Listen," Jack said firmly, "if he ever comes near you again, ever, call me. Don't handle it alone. I've got you, okay?" She nodded, feeling her chest loosen for the first time since the stairs. "Okay," she whispered. Jack pulled her into a hug, solid, protective, the kind that felt safe. Nothing romantic, just reassurance. When he stepped back, she said, "I haven't seen Annabelle today. I wanted to talk to her." Jack glanced at his bike. "Hop on, let's go." She didn't argue. She climbed onto the back of Jack's bike, holding on lightly. The engine roared to life, and moments later, they were gone. Jake stayed where he was. He watched them leave, trying to piece together what he had just seen. From where he stood, it felt like he had been shut out, like whatever this was, it wasn't meant for him. He didn't say anything. He got on his bike and rode off in the opposite direction. Cleo sat on her bed with her diary open on her lap. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet she usually needed to think. Her pen moved fast across the page. She didn't even stop to reread what she was writing. She just needed to get it out. Every thought, every fear, every question that wouldn't leave her alone. The stairs creaked downstairs. She barely noticed. Then the door to her room flew open. "I got your text." Cleo jumped up so fast her diary slipped from her lap. "Annabelle," she said, breathless, "where have you been? I've been trying to reach you." "I'm sorry," Annabelle said quickly, closing the door behind her. "I was with a friend." Cleo's voice cracked. "I'm scared." Annabelle froze for a second. Then she walked closer. "I get that, but what if he's changed?" Cleo stared at her. "Changed? Just like that?" Her voice rose without her meaning to. "Annabelle, this is Luke. He threatened us. He said it wasn't over. Then he disappears, and now he's back?" She was pacing now, hands in her hair. She hadn't raised her voice in a long time, but the tension had been building for weeks, and it finally spilled over. "This isn't normal," Cleo said. "This doesn't feel right." Annabelle stepped in front of her. "Hey, listen to me." Cleo shook her head. "He's planning something. I can feel it. I really thought this was over." Annabelle softened her tone. "Cleo, people do change. You said it yourself. He looked different. He moved differently. His posture, his energy, everything you described sounded calmer. Maybe he's done being that person." Cleo stopped pacing. She took a deep breath, then another. Her shoulders slowly dropped. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I just don't feel comfortable." "I know," Annabelle said gently, "but don't relive the past before it even repeats itself." They sat on the bed together. Cleo closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. In, out. In, out. She wasn't convinced, but she was calmer. Jake had grown quieter, not in the way people noticed at first. He was always reserved, always kept to himself, but now even the small routines were gone. He didn't wait for Jack after school anymore. He got on his bike and rode off alone, not home, just away. Sometimes he came back late, sometimes not until evening. Jack noticed. One afternoon, Jake sat under a tree, phone in hand, barely scrolling. Jack dropped down beside him. "You good?" Jake didn't look up. He didn't answer. "Is this about Luke?" Jack asked. "I don't care about Luke," Jake replied. Jack watched him for a moment. "Then is it about Cleo?" Jake finally looked up, just for a second, said nothing. Jack smiled slightly. "You know you matter to her, right?" Jake's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Luke stood across the courtyard, half hidden near the building. He wasn't moving. Luke's eyes met Jack's first. Then they moved to Jake. Just for a second. No expression, no warning. Luke turned away and walked off. Jake stood up immediately. "I'll see you at home." Everything looked normal again. At least, that was how it appeared on the surface. School carried on the way it always did. Bells ringing, students crowding hallways, laughter spilling out of small groups. Even Luke's return hadn't disrupted anything Cleo once imagined it would. He was there now, present, consistent, but strangely distant. He didn't approach her, he didn't linger, he didn't circle familiar corners the way he used to. When Cleo did see him, it was always from afar, walking through hallways like any other student, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Sometimes their paths crossed just enough for her to feel his presence without truly seeing him. Other times their eyes almost met, almost, but something always shifted at the last second, like he was deliberately looking away. It unsettled her at first. Then slowly she adjusted. Maybe Annabelle was right. Maybe he had moved on. She stopped looking over her shoulder, stopped bracing herself for impact. And just when the unease began to fade into acceptance, something unexpected happened. They were standing together during lunch, Cleo, Annabelle, and a few friends, talking about nothing important, the kind of conversation that filled space more than meaning. That was when a staff member approached, holding a neatly wrapped bouquet. He looked around briefly before stopping in front of Annabelle. "Annabelle Valentine?" The group fell quiet. "Yes," she answered, confused. The bouquet was handed to her, fresh flowers, soft colors, carefully arranged. No note, no name, just the weight of it in her hands. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the reactions came all at once. "Ooh! Wait, who's that from? Annabelle, you've got a secret admirer?" Annabelle laughed awkwardly, shaking her head as she looked down at the flowers. "I honestly don't know. This has to be a mistake." Cleo studied the bouquet, surprised but not jealous, more curious than anything. "It could be Jack," she offered gently. "He does stuff like this sometimes." Annabelle considered it. "Maybe, but it's not my birthday. Nothing's happened recently." One of the girls leaned in. "That's exactly what a secret admirer would do." The group buzzed with speculation, excitement building around something that felt harmless, even sweet. Annabelle smiled, still puzzled, eventually accepting the flowers as they moved on with their day. But Cleo couldn't shake the quiet strangeness of it. Nothing was wrong, nothing was alarming, and yet something felt different. Luke stayed distant, life stayed normal, and somewhere between routine and calm, a thread had been pulled, so subtly that no one noticed it tighten. Not yet. Annabelle found Jack in the living room that evening, halfway through dinner, one arm slung lazily over the back of the couch. She stood in front of him for a second, flowers in hand. "Did you send me flowers?" she asked. Jack raised an eyebrow, then another. "Flowers? Should I be offended that I'm being accused?" "So you didn't," she pressed. He grinned. "Nope, but now I'm curious." Then, teasing, "Do you have a boyfriend I don't know about?" "I don't have a boyfriend," Annabelle said flatly. Jack leaned back. "Well then," he gestured at the bouquet, "looks like my little sister has a secret admirer." Jake walked in just then, slowing when he saw the flowers. "What's going on?" he asked. "Apparently," Jack said, amused, "Annabelle's getting flowers from someone who isn't us." Jake looked at the bouquet for a moment longer than necessary. "Maybe it's just a secret admirer," he said, quieter than the room required. Jack shrugged. "Could be." Jake lingered a second longer. "At least it's nothing like Luke," he muttered. The room shifted. Jack turned to him. Annabelle looked up. "What does Luke have to do with this?" she asked. Jake shrugged, already retreating. "Nothing." A pause. "The flowers are nice." He walked out. Annabelle stood there, the humor gone now. "So," she said slowly, more to herself than anyone else, "so if it's not you—" She didn't finish the sentence. She just turned and left the room. School went on the way it always did. Bells rang, lessons dragged, laughter echoed in corridors. If anyone were watching from the outside, they would think the tension had passed. But inside, things were off. Jake wasn't just quiet anymore. He was elsewhere. His body showed up, but his mind didn't stay. He rode longer after school, stayed out later than usual, came home when the house was already calm. When he did speak, it was short, careful, like words cost more than they used to. He thought a lot, too much, about things he refused to name. Cleo noticed, but she didn't chase. Not because she didn't care, not because she had moved on. She was just full. Full of thoughts she hadn't sorted yet, full of feelings she didn't trust herself with. And somewhere between the confusion of Luke's return and the silence Jake had left behind, she chose stillness over reaching. She wasn't pulling away, she was standing still. Sometimes that looks the same. Annabelle, on the other hand, remained Annabelle. Bright, present, effortlessly alive. The flowers didn't become a topic of concern for her. She treated them the way she treated most things, lightly. She trimmed the stems, found a clean bottle, and placed them near the window where sunlight touched the petals in the morning. Not out of attachment, just care. When Cleo noticed them again, she paused for a second longer than necessary. "They're still pretty," she said quietly. Annabelle shrugged, adjusting the bottle. "Flowers don't deserve to die just because I don't know who sent them." Cleo nodded. That made sense. A moment passed. "Whoever it is," Cleo added, almost absent-mindedly, "they're intentional." Annabelle laughed softly. Or dramatic. Cleo didn't smile right away. She thought about how Luke had never brought flowers, never left anything behind that asked for nothing in return. The thought passed quickly, but not without weight. At school, Luke existed like a shadow you couldn't quite trace. He didn't approach, didn't linger, didn't stare. Sometimes Cleo would sense movement nearby and look up, only to catch his back disappearing into the crowd. Other times, she'd spot him across the courtyard, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Not the boy who once claimed space like it belonged to him. This version walked like he didn't need to be seen, and that unsettled her more than his presence ever had. Annabelle never brought him up. Jack stayed quiet. Jake said nothing at all. Then the gift came again. Not flowers this time. A small teddy bear appeared during lunch, placed carefully beside Annabelle's bag by someone who left before anyone noticed. The girls erupted in teasing laughter, nudging Annabelle, asking questions she couldn't answer. "A secret admirer for real," someone said. Annabelle lifted the bear, amused more than anything. "This is getting excessive." Cleo watched her closely. Not with jealousy, with curiosity, because something about the timing felt wrong, because the quiet had lasted too long, and because when things stayed calm for this long, Cleo had learned not to relax, but to listen. When the final bell rang that afternoon, Jake did what he always did. He walked straight toward his bike, hands in his pockets, eyes forward. No looking around, no waiting. "Jake, wait up." The voice came from behind him. He stopped. When he turned around, he saw a girl jogging toward him, one of his classmates. He knew her face, knew her name, Ricky. They weren't friends, they barely spoke, just the usual nods, a quiet hi once in a while. She slowed when she reached him, slightly out of breath. "Hey," she said, smiling. Jake hesitated before answering. "Hi." There was a pause. Not awkward, just careful. Ricky shifted her bag on her shoulder. She looked like someone who had rehearsed this moment in her head. She chose her words slowly. My driver didn't come today, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind dropping me off." Jake frowned slightly. "You want me to drop you off?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, if that's okay. I mean, if you're already heading out." Jake looked at his bike, then back at her. This wasn't something he did, not really. But in his head, it felt simple. Just a ride, just helping a classmate, a one-time thing. "All right," he said finally. Ricky's face lit up. "Thank you." She climbed on behind him, careful at first, then holding on when the bike started moving. Her hands rested lightly against him. For her, it felt exciting. For Jake, it felt unfamiliar, slightly uncomfortable, but he said nothing. They rode off. A few steps away, Cleo stood among other students leaving the building. She hadn't planned to stop. She hadn't planned to watch, but she did. She saw Jake pause. She saw the girl approach him. She saw the way they talked. Then she saw Ricky climb onto the bike. Her chest tightened. She remembered the conversation, the hesitation, the "one of these days." And now this. Cleo didn't cry. She didn't turn away dramatically. She didn't react on the outside. She just stood there for a second longer than necessary. Then she exhaled softly, lowered her gaze, and kept walking. At first, it was nothing. A simple thank you the next day at school. Jake waved it off like it meant nothing, because to him, it didn't. It was just a ride, just helping a classmate. But after that, Ricky didn't disappear. She started showing up in small ways, casual ones. Sometimes she'd sit beside him when he was alone, not forcing conversation, just being there. She talked about movies she'd watched, random things she'd seen online, things she knew most people could relate to. She laughed easily. She made comments. Every now and then, she even made Jake smile. Not fully, not openly, but enough. Ricky was good company. She didn't cling. She didn't crowd him. She knew how to read the room. When Jake walked alone, she walked with him. When he sat down with his food, she'd ask if she could join him, tray in hand, already half smiling, like she expected a yes, but wouldn't be offended by a no. And Jake never said no, not because he felt something, but because he didn't feel pressure. To him, it was neutral, easy, classmate energy. In class, she started sitting closer, asking him questions, borrowing a pen, leaning in slightly when she spoke. Nothing obvious, nothing loud. A friendship, if you could call it that, slowly took shape. And then came the rides. At first, Jake told himself it was occasional. Then it became familiar. Ricky asked more often. Jake didn't love it, the closeness, the physical presence behind him, but he didn't refuse either. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, just convenience, just being helpful. To Ricky, it felt like progress. To Jake, it felt like adaptation. One afternoon, she mentioned learning how to ride a bike. She said it casually, almost jokingly, then brought it up again another day. Then again. Jake hesitated. He said he'd never taught anyone before. Ricky smiled, said she was a fast learner, said they could take it slow, said there was no rush. She didn't push loudly, but she didn't let it go either. And Jake, as usual, didn't shut the door. He just left it slightly open. For Annabelle, it started with the notes. Not many, just one, then another. They weren't slipped into her bag or her locker or anywhere that would feel deliberate or invasive. Sometimes she'd find one tucked neatly into the pages of a book she'd just opened in the library. Other times, folded once and resting on a desk she was about to sit at, as if it had been waiting patiently, places that felt neutral, ordinary, almost accidental. The notes themselves were simple, polite, careful, nothing intense, nothing that asked for anything in return. She told Cleo about them casually, the way Annabelle did most things, without mystery, without excitement, without fear. "Another one showed up today," she said once, like it was just another detail of her day. Cleo asked the obvious question, "Doesn't that make you curious?" Annabelle shrugged. "If the person wants to be known, they will be. I'm not going to chase a ghost." Someone nearby joked that maybe the admirer was working up the courage before Valentine's Day. The words were said lightly, almost jokingly, but they lingered longer than expected. Valens was close enough now that people were starting to talk about it. Not seriously, not yet, but enough for the idea to sit in the air. Annabelle didn't read too much into it. She accepted the notes the same way she accepted most things, with grace but distance. She didn't obsess over them, didn't hide them either. Sometimes she kept them tucked away, sometimes she forgot about them entirely. To her, they were kind. Nothing more, nothing less. Elsewhere, dynamics were shifting too. Ricky had grown more comfortable around Jake. What started as small conversations had turned into quiet routines, walking together between classes, sitting beside him at lunch, filling silences that Jake usually preferred to keep quiet. She wasn't forceful, but she was consistent. Compliments slipped in naturally, a hand reaching out to brush something imaginary from his hair, fingers adjusting his side-swept fringe with a smile, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jake noticed. He wasn't oblivious, just slow to react when emotions were involved. The attention didn't excite him, it unsettled him. He wasn't used to being touched casually, wasn't used to someone stepping so comfortably into his space. He didn't pull away sharply, but there was a quiet tension in him now, a sense that something was moving faster than he knew how to handle. Jack, on the other hand, remained exactly who he had always been, friendly, giving rides, talking to everyone, laughing easily. To anyone watching, nothing about Jack had changed. Cleo felt the difference anyway. She noticed Ricky, the way she leaned into Jake's space, the way Jake didn't stop it, not because he welcomed it, but because he didn't know how to push back. From a distance, Cleo saw it clearly. From a woman's perspective, there was no confusion. She knew what Ricky was doing. She knew why. And it didn't make her indifferent. She didn't react, didn't confront anyone, didn't change the way she moved through the world. But there was a growing sense that while everything around her was slowly rearranging itself, notes appearing, bonds shifting, people leaning toward each other, she was standing still, watching it all happen. As time went on, Valentine's season crept closer. It showed in small ways at first. A single rose tucked under someone's arm, quiet laughter in corners, students lingering longer after school, pretending they weren't waiting for anyone in particular. Whispers floated through the hallways, who asked who said yes, who was still hoping. By closing hours, the school felt different, softer, warmer. Groups stood around in pairs, some people walked out together, others hovered near lockers, pretending to look busy while waiting for the right moment. Cleo and Annabelle were heading out when Annabelle stopped. "I forgot my book," she said, turning back toward her locker. When she opened it, she froze, just slightly. Inside was another envelope. This one was different. It smelled faintly of cologne. A rose was taped neatly to the front, its stem trimmed, its petals still fresh. The envelope itself was sealed with a ribbon, tied carefully, like someone had taken their time with it. Annabelle slipped it out and opened it quietly. "Will you be my Val?" She stared at the words for a moment, more puzzled than excited. Cleo leaned closer. "So, I told you." Annabelle exhaled softly. "But how am I supposed to say yes when I don't even know who you are?" She didn't look flustered, she didn't blush. She simply folded the note and slipped it into her bag. "I'm not taking this seriously. If whoever this is wants an answer, they'll have to show up." They turned to leave. Earlier that same day, Ricky had made a decision of her own. She caught Jake during class change, standing by his desk, already half-packed. "Hey," she said lightly, "can I see you after school?" Jake looked up, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Is there a problem?" No, she said quickly, smiling to soften it. "Nothing like that. I just wanted to talk." He nodded. "Okay." But the moment the words left her mouth, Jake already knew. This wasn't casual. This wasn't random. And whatever it was, he didn't want to be there for it. So when the final bell rang, he didn't wait. He slipped out before the halls filled, cut straight through the lot, got on his bike, and rode off. Smooth, quiet, practiced. Ricky had been rehearsing the conversation all day. The tone, the timing, the words. When she finally went looking for him, he was gone. She checked the classrooms, the hallways, then the parking lot. His bike wasn't there. She sighed, not angry, not shocked, just unsurprised. Typical Jake. On her way back to grab her bag, she spotted Annabelle and Cleo walking out together. "Hey," Ricky called. "Have you seen Jake?" Annabelle shook her head. "No, he must have gone home. He leaves early these days." "Yeah," Ricky said quietly. "Thanks." Then her eyes met Cleo's. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't friendly either, just two people understanding more than they were willing to say. Ricky walked past without another word. Annabelle noticed the moment, the pause, the glance, but said nothing. They stepped outside, the air buzzing with Valentine's energy, unaware of how many lines had just quietly crossed. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Jake lay on his back, the room too quiet for the thoughts racing through his head. He knew what tomorrow would bring, Ricky's presence. He knew her well enough now to know she wouldn't drop it, not dramatically, just persistently. After a while, he gave up on sleep altogether. He swung his legs off the bed, padded quietly down the hallway, and stopped in front of Jack's door. A pause, then a knock. "Come in." Jack was sprawled on his bed, controller in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. He glanced up when he saw Jake standing there. "You never come to my room," Jack said. "What is it now?" Jake shut the door behind him. "I need to talk to you." Jack muted the game slowly. "Do you have plans on Valentine's Day?" Jake asked. Jack blinked. "Since when do you care about my social calendar?" "Just answer the question." Jack studied him for a second, then shrugged. "No, I was planning to stay in. Why?" Jake exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Can I ask a favor?" Jack leaned back. "You never ask for favors, and when you do, it's always unhinged. Just hear me out." Jack sighed. "Go on." Jake hesitated, then spoke. "I think Ricky's going to ask me out." Jack's eyebrows lifted. "You think?" "She's been obvious," Jake said. "Too obvious." "And that's a problem because," Jack asked. "Because I'm not going." Jack stared at him. "Not going where?" "Anywhere," Jake said, "with her on Valentine's. I don't want to hurt her." Jack scoffed. "So what's the favor?" Jake met his eyes. "I want you to go in my place." Silence. Then Jack laughed, once, short, sharp. "Absolutely not." "I'm serious." "So am I," Jack said. "I do crazy things, I admit that. But this is a new level." "If you don't go," Jake said quietly, "I won't." Jack shook his head. "Jake, that's insane. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say?" "Anything," Jake replied. "You're better at this than me." Jack snorted. "That's not a compliment. It's still true." After a moment, Jack reached for his controller again. "I'm not saying yes." The next morning was cold and quiet. They stood outside, bikes beside them, the sky still pale with early light. Jake adjusted his helmet, ready to leave, when Jack spoke. "Fine." "Fine?" "I'll do it, but just this once." Jake looked at him. "You're sure?" Jack mounted his bike. "Don't make me regret it." Jake nodded. "Thank you." Jack smirked. "You owe me, big time." Then he rode off. That day at school, Ricky found Jake near the lockers, slightly out of breath like she'd been looking for him. "I didn't see you yesterday. Are you okay?" Jake didn't hesitate. "I had a bad headache. I had to leave." "I was worried," she admitted, then paused, long enough for him to know what was coming. "I wanted to ask you something, for Valentine's." She didn't rush it, didn't corner him, just stood there, honest. "I get it if you don't want to," she added quickly. "I just thought I'd ask." Jake felt none of the panic he'd expected. "Sure," he said. "I'll go." Ricky blinked. "Wait, really?" He nodded. Her smile came instantly, bright and genuine. She hugged him before she could stop herself. Jake returned it, awkward, brief, but real enough. "I'll text you the address," she said. "I know a nice place." "Okay." As she walked away, she felt light. As Jake watched her go, he felt resolved. Valentine's Day had always meant something different in the Valentine house. It wasn't just about couples or romance, it was tradition. A quiet rule everyone grew up knowing. The house woke up dressed for the occasion, red and pink decorations lining the walls, heart-shaped chocolates laid out on the kitchen counter like they'd been waiting all year. It felt like Christmas, only softer. Mr. Valentine handed Mrs. Valentine a bouquet of flowers like he always did, never missing a year. She smiled the way she always did too, like she still hadn't gotten used to it. Chocolates were exchanged, small gifts passed from hand to hand, laughing, teasing, familiar comfort. Jack tossed Annabelle a wrapped box. Jake slid a card across the table. Annabelle hugged both of them without thinking. They all had plans for the evening. Annabelle just didn't know she wasn't the only one. Later that day, her phone buzzed while she was in her room. Cleo. She told her everything, the dress, the message, the meeting place. Cleo listened quietly. Just be careful, Cleo said finally. If anything feels off, call me. I don't care what time it is. Annabelle smiled. I'll be fine. Cleo laughed softly. You're braver than you think. Annabelle exhaled, nerves settling somewhere between excitement and doubt. That evening, Annabelle stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the red dress over her frame. She sprayed perfume lightly, adjusted her hair, then paused. Am I really doing this? She wondered. Getting dressed to meet someone I don't even know? She smiled at her reflection anyway. Downstairs, the house hummed with quiet anticipation. No one knew what the night would bring. And that was exactly how Valentine's Day began. Jack was early. That alone already said everything about him. This wasn't his first time on a romantic date. He knew the rules, the rhythm, the timing. He knew what women noticed and what they remembered long after the night was over. So he arrived early, dressed impeccably, smelling expensive, a single rose resting neatly in his hand. He took a seat, ordered a drink for himself, and waited. When she walked in, he stood immediately. Ricky looked stunning. Not just dressed well, she looked radiant. Jack smiled, stepped forward, gently lifted her hand, toosed the back of it, and complimented her effortlessly. He pulled out her chair, waited for her to sit, then pushed it in with ease. She hadn't expected this. At school, he was quiet, reserved, almost distant. This version of him felt completely different. Conversation flowed easily. Jack was charming without trying too hard. Attentive, present, warm. He ordered for them with confidence, made her laugh, listened when she spoke, remembered the small things she mentioned. By the time dessert arrived, Ricky felt like she was floating. When he handed her the rose and wished her a happy Valentine's Day, she felt genuinely special, seen, chosen, adored, like a queen. She told him she never knew he had this side, that at school he always seemed uninterested, closed off. Jack simply smiled and brushed it off, saying some sides didn't belong in classrooms. The night ended beautifully. Outside the restaurant, he asked if he could take her home. She declined gently, her driver was already on the way. Before leaving, she thanked him sincerely, told him she hadn't expected the night to be this good. Then, before he could respond, she leaned in and kissed him. It was shy, soft, brief, and completely unexpected. Her car pulled away, leaving Jack standing there, stunned. He waved instinctively, his smile frozen, his thoughts racing. That hadn't been part of the plan. That hadn't been expected. He turned back toward the restaurant to collect his things. And then she saw her. There was no doubt about it. Annabelle. She was seated at a table not far from where he had been sitting, dressed beautifully, laughing softly, on a date. His confusion deepened when his eyes followed her gaze. The man sitting across from her made his stomach drop. Luke. For a split second, Jack considered walking up to them, confronting them, demanding answers. His instincts screamed at him to intervene, but he didn't. He walked straight to his table, picked up his jacket, and left without looking back, because whatever that was, it wasn't something that could be handled in public. Jack got home first. That alone was unusual. He didn't greet anyone, didn't pause in the living room, didn't even glance toward his brother's door. He went straight upstairs, straight into his room, and slammed the door behind him. The suit jacket came off first, flung carelessly onto the bed. His hands were shaking, jaw tight, chest rising and falling faster than usual. Anger sat heavy in his body, sharp and unfiltered. He paced, back and forth. What he had seen didn't make sense, and the fact that it didn't make sense only made him angrier. Jake heard the footsteps. He'd been restless all evening, half expecting something to go wrong, half bracing himself for whatever his brother would come back with. But when Jack didn't stop by his room, when he went straight past it, that's when Jake knew something was off. He didn't knock. He walked straight in. Jack was pacing, visibly furious. Not the playful Jack, not the sarcastic one. This was different. Jake assumed the obvious, the date. He asked what was wrong, if everything was okay, already preparing himself to hear how badly things had gone. Jack stopped pacing. Then he laughed, short, sharp, humorless. "You will not believe who I saw tonight." Jake frowned. "Who?" Jack scoffed, irritation bleeding into his voice. "Who do you think? Your sister." Jake blanked. Annabelle? That didn't sound alarming. She was supposed to be out anyway. He tried to piece it together. Maybe Jack had simply seen her on her date. But Jack wasn't done. "Oh, we know the guy," he said. "Very well, and we do not like him." That's when confusion crept in. Jake asked what he was talking about. Jack didn't soften it, didn't ease him into it. Annabelle was on a romantic date with Luke. Silence. Jake froze. For a second, his brain refused to process the words in the order they were spoken. Annabelle and Luke didn't belong in the same sentence, let alone that sentence. He asked how, when, why. None of it added up. Of all the people in the world, Luke? Jack shook his head, running a hand through his hair, frustration etched deep into his expression. She has a lot of explaining to do. Jake stood there, stunned. The shock was so complete that it wiped everything else from his mind. Ricky, the date, the lie, the whole arrangement, gone. None of that mattered anymore, because whatever this was, it was bigger. And whatever Annabelle was hiding, it was about to blow everything apart. Annabelle came home later than usual. The house was quiet, the lights dim, the kind of quiet that should have felt safe, but didn't. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. That was all it took. Jack's door flew open. He was already moving before she could even look up. "Stop." Annabelle froze. Her heart dropped instantly. The tone alone told her everything. This wasn't concern. This wasn't curiosity. This was anger. Jack stood in front of her now, blocking her path. "You don't say another word," he said, "not until you start telling the truth." Annabelle blinked, confused and suddenly terrified. "What are you talking about?" Jake rushed in behind them, instinctively stepping forward. "Jack, calm down." Jack didn't even look at him. "No." His voice rose. The restraint he'd been holding on to all evening snapped. "You think I didn't see you?" he continued, eyes locked on Annabelle. "You think I didn't recognize him?" Annabelle's breath hitched. Recognition dawned slowly. What did you see?" Jack laughed, sharp and bitter. "So this is what the flowers were about," he said. "The dress, the gifts, the secrecy." Annabelle stiffened. "Jack, listen to me." "No," he cut her off immediately. "You've been listening to him, now you listen to me." Jake stepped in again, quieter this time. "Jack, please." The room went silent. Annabelle stopped breathing. Jack exhaled through his nose, disbelief twisting into fury. "You knew," he said, voice low now. "You knew exactly who he was." Annabelle shook her head, finally finding her voice. "It's not what you think. You need to let me explain." Annabelle explained that she never knew Luke was the one behind the notes, the flowers, or the gifts. She had only found out when she got to the cafe. She said she was just as shocked as anyone else would have been. Jack demanded to know why she didn't come home immediately. Annabelle told him the truth. Luke had begged her to stay, not aggressively, not forcefully. He was calm, softer than the Luke they all remembered. He didn't feel threatening. He didn't feel dangerous. He didn't feel like the person who had once scared them all. She explained that she didn't stay because she expected anything romantic. She stayed because she was already there, and she wanted to understand why he had changed. That answer didn't calm Jack. It only made him angrier. He warned her sharply that he never wanted to see her anywhere near Luke again. He didn't care what explanations Luke had. He didn't care how different he seemed. If Luke ever came close to her again, Jack promised he would step in. No hesitation, no second chances. Annabelle nodded. Jake stood quietly the entire time, saying nothing. But for the first time that night, the room felt heavier. Not with anger, but with questions no one was ready to ask out loud. The next day, the house felt different. Not loud, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet where everyone was awake, but no one was really speaking. Jack was quiet. Jake was quiet. Even Annabelle was quiet. It felt like something had happened that couldn't be undone, and everyone was waiting for it to settle. At school, things didn't settle. Jake noticed it the moment he walked in. The looks. People were staring, smiling, whispering. At first, he thought it had something to do with the fight at home, but the stares didn't feel tense. They felt impressed. Then Ricky ran up to him. She hugged him, tightly, comfortably, like it was normal. Too normal. Jake stiffened for half a second, then froze. That was when he started hearing it. The rumors. Valentine's Day had become the only topic at school. Everyone was talking. Who went out with who, where they went, what they got, how romantic it was. And Ricky had a story. She told it to her friends, then their friends, then anyone who cared to listen, about her Valentine's date with Jake Valentine. How romantic it was, how different he was outside school, how he opened doors for her, pulled out her chair, complimented her all night, how he took her to a beautiful restaurant, how he made her feel special. He heard his name more than once, Jake Valentine, spoken with curiosity, excitement, disbelief. People talked about how different he was outside school, how reserved guys were always the most surprising, how no one ever thought he would be the romantic type. Then came the part that made everything stop. The kiss. Not whispered, not vague. Spoken openly, repeated, exaggerated. Ricky wasn't hiding it. She wasn't embarrassed. She was glowing, bragging even, laughing as she told anyone who cared to listen that she got the quiet one, that she got the guy no one else could read. That was when it hit. Not confusion, not shock. Anger. Pure, consuming anger. Jake felt it rise fast and sharp, burning through his chest, tightening his jaw. His hands clenched before he even realized it. He couldn't focus, couldn't sit still. The anger felt familiar, almost identical to the rage Jack had carried the night before. The same loss of control, the same sense of something sacred being crossed without permission. Jake didn't wait for the day to end. He excused himself without explanation, grabbed his things, and left. Straight home. No stops, just distance. His default response when emotions got too loud to manage. Meanwhile, the rumors didn't stop. Cleo heard them too. She heard about the date. She heard about the restaurant. She heard about how perfect it supposedly was. And when she heard about the kiss, something inside her broke in a way she hadn't prepared for. The pain was sharper than she expected, deeper. It didn't come as jealousy at first. It came as shock, followed by a slow, aching realization, the kind that settles heavy in the chest and refuses to move. She hadn't known she was still hoping. She hadn't known she was still holding space for him. But hearing his name attached to someone else, hearing that he'd chosen someone else, pierced her in a way Luke never had. Not because Jake owed her anything, but because somewhere along the line, she had believed there was something unspoken between them, something unfinished. And now, in the eyes of everyone else, it was finished. So, while Jake rode home burning with anger and guilt he didn't know how to place, Cleo walked through the rest of the day quietly, carrying a heartbreak she never planned to admit out loud. Jake didn't knock. He barged into Jack's room like a storm that had been waiting for permission it didn't need. Jack barely looked up at first. "You know the door is for knocking, right?" he said casually, like nothing in the world was wrong. That only made it worse. "How selfish can you be?" Jake snapped. That got Jack's attention. He turned fully this time, brows furrowing. "What are you talking about?" Jake laughed, sharp and humorless. "I told you to replace me on a date. I didn't ask you to kiss the girl." Jack didn't hesitate. "First of all, I didn't kiss her. She kissed me." Jake stepped forward. "That's not the point." His voice was rising now, control slipping. "What is wrong with you?" Jack stood up. "I don't understand why you're mad. You didn't want to go. You didn't want to deal with it. So what exactly is the problem?" "The problem," Jake shot back, "is that you always cross boundaries." Jack scoffed. "No, you crossed yours first." Silence fell between them, heavy, charged. They stared at each other, years of unspoken resentment sitting thick in the air. Then Jack said it. "It's not my fault you don't know how to face uncomfortable situations." Jack didn't blink. "It's not my fault you run from everything," Jack continued. "It's not my fault you keep hurting people who care about you because you don't know how to stay." His voice grew louder, sharper. "I filled in for you. I did what you couldn't. You should be thanking me." Jake laughed again, this time bitter. Then quieter, colder. "Who do you think you are?" That landed. Jack's jaw tightened. "I think I'm the one who actually shows up." Jack continued. "Cleo was in trouble. You stepped back. I stepped in. Ricky needed you. You stepped back. I stepped in. That's why you're mad. You're not mad at me. You're mad at yourself." They went back and forth after that, voices raised, words cutting, Jack calling out Jake's avoidance, Jake throwing Jack's recklessness back in his face. Things they both noticed but never said out loud finally spilled into the open. The fight was never really about Ricky. It wasn't about the date. It wasn't even about the kiss. It was about something much older. It was about who steps forward when things get uncomfortable and who disappears. Jake stood in Jack's room shaking, not with fear, but with the kind of anger that comes when someone finally says what you've been avoiding your whole life. Jack didn't need to shout to dominate the room. He never did. His presence alone was enough, and that was part of the problem. Everything Jack said sounded like truth. Everything Jake felt sounded like betrayal. Jack spoke like someone who had always been chosen, by people, by moments, by situations that demanded confidence. Someone who knew how to walk into tension and bend it to his will. Jake stood there like someone who had spent his life stepping back, letting moments pass him by, convincing himself that silence was safer than choice. The words between them turned sharp, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just honest in the ugliest way. Jack didn't accuse Jake of being weak. He didn't have to. Jake felt it anyway. And Jake didn't accuse Jack of stealing what wasn't his. He accused him of taking what Jake wasn't ready to defend. That was the real wound. Jack had shown up where Jake refused to stand, and Jake hated him for it. Because deep down, the anger wasn't really for Jack. It was for himself. When Jake slammed the door and walked away, it wasn't escape, it was confirmation. Confirmation that when things get complicated, when feelings demand action, when presence is required, Jack steps forward and Jake disappears. And for the first time, neither of them could pretend that difference didn't matter. Annabelle had texted earlier to say she was coming over, to tell Cleo how Valentine's Day went. To Annabelle, it felt like a reveal, not because she meant for it to be dramatic, but because something about the night had shifted her, and she didn't want to carry it alone. Cleo, on the other hand, thought it would be nothing more than feedback, a normal recap, a friend talking about a date. When Annabelle arrived, she found Cleo in her room, just as expected, sitting on her bed, diary in hand. Cleo smiled when she saw her. A quick smile, practiced, the kind that shows up before someone is ready. But Annabelle noticed it immediately. Her eyes, they were slightly swollen. Cleo tried to cover it, standing up, forcing brightness into her voice. "Hey, you're here already." Annabelle didn't smile back. "Have you been crying?" Cleo shook her head too quickly. No, I haven't. Why would you think that?" Annabelle stepped closer. She'd known Cleo too long. She knew what her eyes looked like when she'd been holding things in. "You have," she said gently. Cleo looked away. And that was when it happened. The tears came, not quietly, not neatly. They came like something that had been waiting too long for permission. It wasn't a soft cry. It was the kind that breaks through restraint, the kind that comes after weeks, months of swallowing feelings and telling yourself you're fine. Annabelle froze for half a second, then wrapped her arms around her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't rush her. She just held her. Cleo cried the way strong people cry when they finally can't be strong anymore. When it slowed, Annabelle wiped her tears, brushing her thumbs gently under Cleo's eyes. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked quietly. Cleo didn't answer right away. She hesitated. This wasn't just about her. It involved Jake, and she knew how complicated that made things. Annabelle noticed the pause. "You don't have to protect me," she said softly, "and you don't have to explain everything. Just tell me what hurts." Cleo took a breath, then another, and finally she spoke. Not in anger, not in accusation, just honesty. She didn't say much, only enough. Enough for Annabelle to understand that the rumors about Jake and Ricky had reached her. Enough to admit that she hadn't expected it to hurt that much. Enough to confess that she'd been trying to convince herself she was fine when she wasn't. Annabelle listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend her brother. She didn't minimize the pain. She just listened. After a moment, Annabelle spoke again, carefully. "There's something else," she said, "and I think you should know." Cleo looked at her. Annabelle took a breath. "I don't think it was Jake who went out with Ricky." Cleo frowned. "But that's what everyone's saying." "I know," Annabelle said gently, "but if we're being honest, can you really picture Jake on a romantic date like that?" The question lingered. Cleo didn't answer right away. Annabelle continued. "It was Jack." Cleo's head snapped up. "What?" Annabelle nodded. "I didn't know the details. I just knew Jake didn't go. And while I was my own date, Jack saw me." Cleo's confusion deepened. "Saw you?" Annabelle swallowed. "With Luke." The name landed heavily between them. Cleo didn't speak. She just stared. Annabelle rushed on, her voice steady, but serious. "I didn't know it was him, not until I got there. The secret admirer, the flowers, the notes. I didn't know it was Luke until that night." Cleo shook her head slowly. "This doesn't make sense." "I know," Annabelle said. "Let me explain." And this time, Cleo didn't interrupt. Annabelle told her everything. How the day before Cleo's last birthday, Luke had reached out, not to Cleo, but to her. How he'd said he wanted to be present. How Annabelle had told him no, that Cleo had been through enough, and the kindest thing he could do was step back. She explained the simple birthday text, why it was plain, why it came from him, but sounded distant. That was me, Annabelle admitted quietly. I told him to keep it simple. She went on, how after that, Luke kept talking, asking questions, listening more than he used to. How Annabelle, thinking only of Cleo, started telling him what peace looked like to her, what calm meant, what gentleness was. I wasn't trying to bring him back into your life, she said. I was trying to make him less frightening. I thought if he ever crossed paths with you again, he wouldn't be the Luke we knew. She paused. I thought I was helping. Cleo stayed silent, absorbing it all. That's why I told him to give you space, Annabelle continued. That's why he stopped showing up everywhere. That's why things felt quieter. Her voice cracked slightly. I was grooming him to be better for you. I didn't know he was redirecting all of it. She looked at Cleo, eyes full. I never wanted anything with him. I don't want anything with him. I just wanted him to change. Cleo finally exhaled, a long, tired sigh. The room felt heavy but clearer. Cleo didn't say much after that. She listened, she nodded, she understood. And for the first time in a long while, she stopped trying to make sense of other people's choices. She didn't blame Annabelle. She didn't reach for Jake. She didn't fear Luke. She simply chose herself. Some things don't end with closure. They end with clarity. And that was enough. Jack didn't wait long to do the right thing. He found Ricky before rumors could finish what confusion had started. And for once, he didn't charm his way through it. He told her the truth, all of it, that it wasn't Jake she went out with, that he stepped in when he shouldn't have, that he thought he was helping but crossed the line instead. He didn't excuse it, didn't soften it, didn't blame his brother. He owned it. He apologized, not quickly, not defensively, but fully, for misleading her, for letting her believe something real was happening when it wasn't, for the kiss he didn't stop soon enough. Ricky listened. She didn't cry, she didn't shout, she didn't beg for explanations. She was hurt, that much was obvious. Disappointed, too, but she walked away with her dignity intact. Whatever she felt, she didn't stay where clarity had already been offered and truth had arrived late. Jake didn't get that moment. There was no apology that fixed anything, no conversation that softened the damage. He watched the consequences instead. He lost Cleo without ever fighting for her, not because she stopped caring, but because she chose peace. He fractured something solid with his brother, not because Jack hated him, but because trust doesn't survive silence forever. And for the first time, Jake had no one to step in for him, no one to explain things away, no one to absorb the weight of his decisions. Avoidance finally sat where it belonged, with him. Cleo chose distance, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but because she understood something clearly at last. You don't chase people who keep stepping back. You don't stay where clarity is optional. And you don't wait to be chosen when your heart has already spoken. She didn't need closure from Jake. His absence had explained enough. Some stories don't end with explosions. They end with quiet understanding, with people walking away instead of holding on, with lessons learned too late to undo the damage, but early enough to change someone else watching. And that was the truth left behind. Love doesn't survive avoidance. Silence is still a choice. And eventually, everyone sits with the consequences of the doors they never opened. This story was never really about who ended up with who, because sometimes nobody does. Sometimes love doesn't fail because it wasn't real. It fails because it wasn't faced. Avoidance doesn't always look bad. Sometimes it looks quiet, like silence, like hesitation, like letting someone else step in so you don't have to show up yourself. But every time you step back from what needs honesty, someone else gets hurt. Boundaries matter. Not just the ones we set, but the ones we ignore. Good intentions don't fix broken trust. Trying to help doesn't mean replacing someone, and love, no matter how patient, cannot survive confusion forever. Friendships can crack when honesty is avoided. Care can turn into distance when things are left unsaid. And sometimes letting go is not giving up, it's choosing peace over pain. Not every story ends with love. Some stories end with lessons. And maybe that's the point, because the hardest truth in this story is this: you don't lose people all at once. You lose them slowly, every time you choose fear instead of honesty. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away, learn, and promise yourself not to repeat the same mistakes again.